Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
You're listening to Bloomberg UK Politics. I'm Yuan Potts.
And I'm Caroline Hepker. Welcome to the programme.
Our universities are a tremendous engine of growth, a beacon around the world, and are so well respected.
That was the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, speaking this morning as 316,000 UK teenagers learnt the outcomes of their applications for higher education courses. It's actually the second highest number of applicants on record. But I discover it's actually the first time that the whole of the UK has returned to pre-pandemic exams after teacher-assessed results. I didn't realise this.
Very surprising.
Yeah, and Bridget Phillipson was also talking about how it's the government's mission to break down any barriers to opportunities and help these young people to take their next steps. That's all very big on ambition. The reality, though, is that it's a moment of anxiety. Do you remember A-level results day? I mean, not just for the students who want their uni places, but also for the universities themselves, facing a very difficult financial year ahead.
Yeah, Bloomberg's own reporting alongside re-recruitment shows that young people in Britain need a university degree now more than ever in order to thrive in a bumpy economy. And that rather flies in the face of the government's push for vocational training and for apprenticeship as an alternative route into the workplace. But with increasing costs and rising entry standards, is there a danger of university becoming out of reach for more and more young people?
Yeah, UK universities themselves are in such a precarious position. I mean, I did a big investigation about this only a few months ago. The country's higher education institutions are in dire financial straits, basically because of, number one, inflation, also the tuition cap and immigration curbs. Some have deficits of up to £24 million and have had to resort to shutting down entire departments.
That's before we even mention the rising costs for those who actually get into university. Some students are reported leaving with up to £100,000 in debt, although, of course, it's not debt in the normal sense, rather an obligation to pay more tax, possibly for the rest of your life. Bridget Phillipson was on ITV this morning promising further reforms to make the system fairer. So lots and lots of challenges for the sector. Well, let's discuss all of this with Edward Peck. He's acting board chair of the Universities and Colleges Admission Service, better known as UCAS. He's also Vice-Chancellor of Nottingham Trent University. Edward, thanks so much for joining us on the programme today. Let's just talk about today to begin with. Any emerging trends in this set of results? What's changed over the last couple of years?
Yeah, so first of all, it's great to be on the show. And the key message is that more applicants have got an offer, have been confirmed at their first choice university today. It's over 80% now, up significantly from last year. So that's great news for applicants. And also, it would appear that more students from disadvantaged backgrounds are also getting into university, which is great news. So I think they're the two positives. There's quite a lot of challenges in the system, which you've just been referring to. But immediately for students, this morning it's a buyer's market. There are a lot of places out there in clearing at a whole range of different institutions. So it's a good year to be getting your level 3 qualifications.
Yeah, absolutely. You said more students on free school meals going into higher education, fewer foreign students. That's one challenge. And also something that I learnt that is new, or seemed new to me anyway, the idea actually of trading up through clearing, i.e. dropping your first choice uni place in order to secure a better place, maybe at a better university. How common is that?
It's becoming more common, and we think in the clearing this year there'll be roughly equal thirds. A third of students who didn't do as well as they hoped they might, a third of students who did better than they thought they would, and a third of students who are applying for the first time. So clearing now is a bit of a misnomer. For some students, it's a chance to rethink your decisions or indeed to apply for the first time. So it's a much more flexible system than perhaps people realise. And clearing isn't what it used to be, perhaps certainly when I went to university. It's a much more varied set of activities now that students can pursue.
You were part of Theresa May's post-18 education review into fees and funding, better known as the Auger Review. Is university worth the money, given the popularity of apprenticeships and the other options out there now for when you're turning 18? Is it still worth students going to university, all students?
Overall, yes. So the average lifetime earnings for graduates still far outstrip those of non-graduates. I think the distinction being drawn between apprenticeships and universities is slightly misleading because a very large number of students or apprentices do their studies actually at university. And the key challenge around apprenticeships is the number. And that's not in the control of universities. That's in control of employers, because these people are fundamentally employees who are doing some learning and off the job. So I think it's an option. It's always going to be a capped option in terms of how many apprenticeships are available. But it's not a distinction particularly about universities or apprentices. And indeed, most courses at university are vocational. Medicine, law, broadcasting. You're still studying ultimately to pursue a career. And certainly at Nottingham Trent University, you have to do 240 hours, about 8 weeks of work-like experience that's assessed as part of your degree. So you could say that actually often is a year-long placement or it's a shorter placement. But that, in many ways, looks like a combination of study and work that's a bit like an apprenticeship. So I think there's a bit of a false dichotomy here.
Yeah, OK, point taken. The issue, though, is that the higher education sector is talking about an emergency rescue package, has been for some months, and it's becoming very acute now, one from government. Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, has said that universities in England should not expect a government bailout. Do you really think that that's tenable this year?
Yes. So I think the issue about the home undergraduate numbers is that the numbers are similar to previous years, just the distribution is changing. So more students have been accepted by higher tariff universities. And they're doing that to compensate from their predicted reduction in postgraduate international students, which they will know about in 5 or 6 weeks' time when those students either enrol or don't enrol. But we still have one of the best funded higher education systems in the world. We still have universities that are financially robust, are sitting on, in some cases, quite large reserves. At some point, we do need a change in the fee regime. I don't think having a large single increase now is the right thing to do. My view is that what the government should look at is an inflation-linked increase from 2025 onwards, maybe 2%, £200 a year, whatever is the right figure. What we need is certainty. We need to know that's going to happen for a number of years. If we get £500 now and nothing for another 10 years, we get the same degree of volatility and uncertainty in our finances. And that's what's really difficult to handle. And that's where the international student numbers are difficult, because they've gone up and now they've gone down by a factor of 50% over the course of one admission cycle. So it's the volatility that I think is causing universities the real challenges. I don't think most are in crisis. I don't think the sector's in crisis. Some are having to take some measures they prefer not to. Some are renegotiating their relationship with their lenders. But to date, no university has gone out of business. I don't think as a consequence of what we're seeing now, one will do so in the near future.
Well, that's very interesting, because there have been plenty of warnings, haven't there, about universities' finances. If one was to go out of business, or several to go out of business, is that a problem? Does it matter? Failing businesses go out of business, don't they?
Well, I think that's a really interesting question. So have we got the right configuration of universities in the right place across the UK? Probably not. If this was to drive some mergers or federations or those sorts of reconfigurations, that might be beneficial. There are probably some inefficiencies in how universities are currently configured, what subjects they teach, often in very close geographical proximity, etc., etc. So I do think if it drives some of those rationalisations of provision, that's probably good for the universities, good for the staff, and good for the students. But I'm not sure that the broader issue, I think, is just getting stability into the system. And any business just doesn't like uncertainty. And it's the uncertainty, I think, that's causing most of the problem. The challenge, of course, if a university were to close, is what happens to students. Of course, there are student protection plans. So other universities step in and teach those students. I imagine they'd be funded to have a teach-out, as we call it, as those courses run through. It's not unusual, actually, for courses to close and for students to stop being admitted and the students already there to have what we call a teach-out. So we're familiar with doing that, and it usually happens in a calm and measured way. So I think we just have to pick our way through it.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's going to happen very soon or to any great extent.
I'm surprised, because only this week Vice-Chancellors in England were warning about imminent problems for universities going into the next academic year, this term. So I'm surprised that you say that actually a funding settlement for UK universities doesn't need to emerge swiftly. It's something to look at for 2025. I mean, I've spoken to other vice-chancellors, and that's not been the message that they've given. There's been across the sector quite a lot of sort of concern. So I sort of just wanted to push back on that idea of financial concerns.
So I think universities sometimes have a characteristic of catastrophizing, I think, situations somewhat. And of course, if you're a sector looking for additional funding, then talking up the nature of the problem is...
Sure. But even somebody like Lord Willits, who is the architect of student fees that I spoke to, and I've spoken to a number of times, was saying that the next government, the Labour government, needs to have a kind of holistic approach and think about a new funding settlement with the sector.
Yeah, so I think that's why you need a fee increase. But I think we need one that's sustainable over a period of time. The other element, I think, is we do need to increase the maintenance loans. They've gone down in value significantly over the last 10 years. And the threshold at which people can take the largest maintenance loan hasn't changed for, I think 12 years. And that would stimulate demand. I think some people are being put off going to university by the perception they can't afford their day-to-day living expenses. So I think stimulating demand through being more generous with the loans regime. And I think if you're going to increase fees, you need to do something about the loans regime at the same time so students don't feel it's all coming at their expense. I think the irony of some positions, so the Russell Group has been saying for some time that they lose money on every undergraduate student they teach. Well, it's hard to reconcile with the fact they've just gone out and recruited a whole lot more. So I think you have to differentiate between the reality, I think, of where we are and how it's manageable. We do need some support in the medium to long term, with some of the rhetoric you're hearing about it's all doom and gloom immediately, because I don't think that helps anybody. And I don't think it helps our conversation with the Treasury in the UK as we come up to a spending review. I think we need some realism about the art of the possible, both the government and what universities actually need to see themselves through this. And the much bigger issue is international students and getting the graduate visa route, which the government has now committed to again, onto the front pages of the international press. It's the international student decline that's causing the current challenges, not slow decline in the value of the undergraduate fee.
Edward, thank you so much. It's great to get your thoughts on that. Edward Peck, Acting Board Chair of the University and Colleges Admission Service, UCAS, also Vice-Chancellor of Nottingham Trent University. Really interesting conversation.
Yeah.
And Edward's saying that universities aren't perhaps as cash-strapped as they're saying, but they need stability in their finances and that kind of predictability, which I think some of them feel they haven't had. And
also, yes, an increase in terms of long-term funding. So it's not that he's advocating not for there to be, more support in terms of incomes for UK universities. But I think still a point very well worth making, of course, from UCAS and from Edward Peck joining us on the programme this morning. Thank you so much for your time. That's it from us for today. If you like the programme, don't forget to subscribe and give it 5 stars so that other people can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify or wherever you listen.
This episode was produced by Tiwa Adebayo and Sophie Arundel, and our audio engineer was Meredith Frank. I'm Yuan Potts.
And I'm Caroline Hepker. We'll be back with more on Monday. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg UK Politics. Listen weekdays at noon on DAB Digital Radio in London.